I walked into my son's room and he was listening to ghost stories on his phone. I remember when I was his age and I listened to Jump Stories. Jump Stories was a popular scary story podcast when I was younger. They say love is intense, but I disagree. Fear is stronger, and this is probably why I enjoyed being afraid. I noticed his eyes were closed, but his ears were open. He was laying down on the floor. Perhaps the rug turned into a magic carpet while he was listening to the story and took him to another world. I tapped him on the shoulder and he jumped up, perhaps returning from his mini field trip. He looked up at me and froze. "Dad, you scared me. Is everything okay?" "Yes, I just came in here to ask, what did you want to eat? Your mom is thinking about ordering pizza." "Pizza sounds great, Dad. Can we get pepperoni with the cheese in the crust?" "Yes, we can get that. In fact, it's been a while since we had that kind. That's a good idea. I'll let your mom know that we should order that kind." As I was leaving out of his room, I turned around and asked him what was the show he was listening to called. He said, "Truth or Scare." I asked him, was it scary? "Dad, it's the scariest podcast out right now. I listen to it every night. The host of the show is the keeper of the tales, and the stories he tells us are either true or false. You have to determine what the story is going to be about before the next show airs." I told him I was interested in listening to one. I asked him which story was the scariest so far. He told me that I should listen to the new story called Don't Tell Dad, and he told me that the keeper of the tales hasn't revealed the truth of the story yet, or if it was false. I swallowed my spit and looked at my son. The title, let alone the way he was staring at me, made me uncomfortable. The last time I listened to scary stories alone was when I was in middle school. I grew out of it, you see, and never thought about listening to them until now. I left his room and went inside of my own. I wasn't expecting to see my wife because she was downstairs doing yoga. Getting ready to listen to the story felt like being in line to ride a roller coaster. Excitement and fear are intoxicating, and both were running through my veins. Although I'm a grown man, sometimes I think of the worst things happening inside of my world. My mind plays commercial breaks of my life deteriorating. I can't help but to think if something is lurking in the shadows while I'm inside of my room, especially late at night. I ran over to the light switch and turned off the light, and I returned to my bed in a hurry. My heart was a jackhammer, creating a pothole of curiosity in my chest. Although the light coming from the hallway looked like a lighthouse and I was the boat far away from land, it made me feel more comfortable. Before I closed my eyes, I found the podcast and clicked play on Don't Tell Dad. The thunder in the background of the story swept me away and took me outside the circle of time. The story began like this. It was a dark and stormy night. The lightning was violent and playing hopscotch in the sky. Ted was laying on his bed reading comic books with a flashlight. His power decided to go into hibernation and he was left in the dark. His parents were in the basement mopping up the water that found its way inside through a cracked window. His mother made a joke saying there was enough water for them to turn their basement into a swimming pool. His father laughed and extended the joke by saying, "We can use the stairs as a diving board." They became hysterical and laughed like hyenas until they remembered, 'd, 'why they were downstairs. Meanwhile, 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 'why they were downstairs. Me Upstairs, Ted threw his comic books on the floor. He was bored and decided to stretch. His bed bounced when he got up, perhaps finally being able to breathe. Ted walked near his window. The curtains were drawn open. The rain tapped against his window like a stranger knocking on a door to see if someone was home. The street was dark and he couldn't see anything out of the window. He shrugged his shoulders and began to walk back to his bed. Psst! The whisper caught Ted off guard. He turned towards the door thinking it was his mother or father. His eyes scanned the entrance of his doorway, and there was nobody there. The entire house was swallowed by darkness and silence, except for the low voice coming from under his bed. Psst, Ted. Ted looked again towards the door. Mom? Dad? Ted went towards his bed and grabbed a flashlight. He shined the light towards the doorway, and there was nothing there. Psst, Ted. Look under your bed. Ted tornadoed around the room until there was a spotlight pointing towards his bed. The flashlight's eyes began to get heavy and fall asleep. He held the flashlight tighter in his hands, hoping he wouldn't have to use it. There was no more light in his bedroom. Is anyone there? He asked. Don't worry, Ted. You have nothing to be afraid of. I'm a friend of your father's. My name is Willie the Whisperer, and your name is Ted. Nice to meet you. How do you know my name? Remember, I am a friend of your father's, silly. We were friends when we were your age. I used to visit him every night, especially during thunderstorms. I hid under his bed and even in his closet. Sometimes I appeared in his dreams. However, all that stopped when he moved away to a new house. But guess what? I came back. Why are you under my bed and not downstairs with him? Because I want to surprise your father. His birthday is coming up. He'll be shocked to see me. But you must do one thing. Don't tell your dad I'm under your bed. He checks under your bed and in your closet every night for monsters. He'll see me for sure. Ted was playing freeze tag. Fear touched him and he could not move. Ted! He heard his father's voice. Ted wanted to run out in the hallway and into his father's arms. However, he was still frozen and stared into the darkness. Don't tell Dad, Ted. This is our little secret. Ted began to tiptoe backwards into the hallway, keeping his eyes towards the bed. He yelled when he bumped into his father. Ted, what's wrong, buddy? I was calling your name, but you didn't answer. Ted was quiet and stared at the bottom of the bed. Ted, why aren't you answering me? Ted's father saw where Ted's eyes were. Oh, you're waiting for me to check under your bed and in your closet? His dad walked towards the bed. He noticed the flashlight was in Ted's hand and asked for it. Ted handed it over. His dad clicked it and it did not turn on. He dropped it on the floor and patted his pockets. He reached into his left pocket and took out his phone. He turned on the flashlight and looked under the bed. He saw a set of familiar yellow eyes staring back at him. Yellow eyes he didn't see since his childhood. I opened my eyes when I heard my son call my name. I paused the video. I didn't know if that was the end or not, but the story was extremely scary. I'm glad my son called my name and took my attention away from the story. It made me feel uneasy. I got out of the bed and walked towards the door to see why he called me. Before I left the bedroom, I heard, "Psst, Dad, someone called your name, but it wasn't me."